Hello, everyone. My name is Thomas Flores, and I'm an associate professor at the Carter School and the director of graduate programs here as well. And it's my pleasure to welcome everyone to Peace Week, organized by the Jimmy and Rosalind Carter School for Peace and Conflict Resolution at George Mason University. And welcome to our session on conflict resolution. Each semester, the Carter School Peace Week is intended to bring together our community, faculty, students, alumni, friends and partners from around the globe, to address questions of peace and conflict resolution, a conversation about how we effectively address urgent issues of justice and peace in our world and in our communities. Our theme for Peace Week this year is Rethinking Peace 2022 and beyond. Around the world, whether it be creeping anti-democratic norms here in the United States, the invasion of Ukraine, we see a destabilization of civil liberties and a destabilization of modes of justice. It calls into mind how we define and pursue peace in our world. And our panel today gets at that theme directly by asking how dispute resolution can be a tool, not just to tamp down complaints, but to build a more just world in our communities. The Carter School has partnered really successfully with the National Association for Community Mediation, or NAFCM, to offer a new degree in contemporary dispute resolution. And the core concept here is conflict revolution, which we can think of as having a few components. I will not describe this as well as DG Mawn and Julie Shedd and our other panelists will, but we can think of conflict resolution as having a few different components. Thinking deeply about how community conflicts are embedded in deeper systems of injustice, practicing deep listening and analysis of those dynamics and those disputes to uncover those dynamics, and finding new tools to address power differentials across parties. In that vein, I'm really excited to pass the mantle on to my friend and my colleague, DG Mawn, who's the president of NAFCM and one of the originators of our new certificate program. I'm also really happy to welcome Julie Shedd, the associate dean at the Carter School, who along with DG teaches courses in this new exciting program and also has been working to design curriculum along these issues and does this work herself here in Northern Virginia. Together, they're going to lead a discussion of how conflict resolution works in action. I'll just remind our audience before we get started that we'll can have questions throughout. We're happy to have those. If you could just raise your hand using the Zoom function, I'll find you. And when we have a little pause, say, hey, someone's got a question. And you can ask as we go along rather than having to wait all the way to the end. Our session is slated to go 90 minutes. And I'd like to remind everyone that we're recording the event today. We'll ask maybe that people stay off camera unless they're asking a question, and maybe make sure to mute their microphones. DG, I think that's everything for me. So let me pass the mantle on to you.
Thank you, Thomas, and thank you everyone for being here. I'm always excited to talk about what is conflict revolution, which is what we're focused on. And so I wanted to give a little bit of an overview of what that is, so we're all sort of in the same room, same space when it comes to what we're going to hear then later from two of our students who are currently in the program and also two of our professors who are holding that space. So conflict revolution means creating the ability for those in conflict to develop their choices on how they want to sit with, be impacted by, and walk through conflict. That space will need to be as transparent as possible, with each individual having their voices heard, with the end result being empowering of their mutual values. Clearly, conflict revolution does not describe our current justice system, where you need to know specific language, have specific degrees, only being heard when the judge rules you can be heard, and only in a certain manner. And then the process is more judging than it is sitting with, talking about, and how you want to walk through that conflict. And so I want to go a little further back of how we got currently to where we are, and to appreciate that human history is composed of wars between cultural groups, people in the thick of a complex, interwoven web of competition and collaboration. And so in that web of do we work together and collaborate, do we compete with each other, really comes from a perspective. Is your perspective deficit, that someone has to lose if someone wins, or is your perspective abundance? We both can win if we take the time to figure out what win means to each of us. Another thing that impacts conflict resolution are values. Holding values acquired early in life becomes so natural as being unconscious. It is, as I'm sure all of you have heard the expression, it's about fish being in a creek. They have no idea water surrounds them. It just is what it is. So are our values when they come up, and they impact how we experience a situation, how we interpret a situation. And another dynamic to keep in mind is no one can develop a community but those who live in that community, that are a part of that community. And that's part of the conflict when institutions, not from the community, are now directing how the community needs to respond. These institutions are not created from scratch. They're created by those in power to represent their comfort, their values, and their history. So what does any of that have to do with conflict resolution? What it has to do with is that conflict is natural. Since the beginning of time, we've had it. So let's not separate it as something that is bad, something that must be resolved by an outsider, something that represents failure. Let's look at conflict as a positive, that two individuals or two groups had the faith and the ability to say, I don't agree, and we need to figure out what to do about it. Conflict is something that we should value, because conflict means that I'm willing to risk me to let you know I'm uncomfortable. I'm willing to risk me to let you know I need more. It is something we should value, and conflict is something that needs to be resolved by those in it, not those outside of it. In other words, this is the process to learn how to take our power back from the recognized justice system and view the justice system instead as the alternative to conflict resolution when nothing else works. So let's try to revolutionize it first before we use the alternative system known as the justice system. And I say that because for many of us, the justice system just is for those who have money, for those who are well-educated, for those with whom the judge and or the jury can most identify as part of their group. For many of us, the justice system is just us. It's only for those of us who don't have political, economic, communication, or social power, and therefore we must follow the law. We must comply. And instead, we want to create a justice system that is life-sustaining, a justice system that builds on hope. And that's what is embedded in the 1964 Civil Rights Act, of which conflict resolution became embedded itself, although not called that, within the act. And so within that act, I'm going to go back a bit to it, is to recognize that both Congress and President Johnson said we need to create America's peacemakers, those in our communities who can create the space for real justice offered to anyone in dispute, disagreement, or disturbance that can and should be our reward and our results of our actions. That everything we do should be about inviting people to lean in, sit with, and be empowered through transparency, through choices, through collaboration to decide how they want to walk through that. When we asked those students who've been in the certificate program, how would you define justice? They said justice is both empowering and equalizing, both considerate and countercultural, and leads to equality and fairness. In particular, social justice is about appreciation, balance, and equity, again, leading to equality and fairness. So the real justice system is about equality and fairness. It's not blind. It recognizes and sees the pain, the harm, the damage, the trauma, and says, how can we create an environment to help those in it walk through it? The act also, as I stated, is about peace co-creating. that we all have the role and responsibility to be part of creating a community where the possibility of conflict representing systems of peace-anchored community, calling all of us in. So conflict means we're in a peace-anchored community. We're called in to provide our diversity of perspectives and thoughts and solutions and whatever's on our mind so that we can be vulnerable together. Conflict means I'm willing to be vulnerable with you. I'm willing to be real with you. I'm willing to figure out how to co-create together, not simply to obey, not simply to be who you want me to be, but for us together. And when we're in that place, our students define that type of peace co-creating arises from a supportive grassroots community committed to active listening, arising from a place of hope, collaboration, partnership, tearing down walls, and committed to change. That in fact, peace creating is about a commitment to change. It's an evolution to constantly move forward together. Finally, conflict revolution is also about engaging the community. The act itself in 1864 built on the assumption that community engagement is not only necessary, but essential to those who seek justice. And that protest is about and means providing testimony for something, not against something. When we embrace protesting as part of engagement, then we hear the message of what are people for that perhaps they're not receiving? What are they for that perhaps not being heard? Let's look at what we're all for and the values those stand on and begin the process of engaging with each other. Standing in place, saying, I both respect you and recognize you for who you are. So again, when we asked our students, what does that mean? They said it's about open group decision-making, understanding the boundaries of what is possible in the moment, focused on all for one and one for all, that this type of engagement is more than being about a vote, more than being about a particular party, more than being political, but instead that true community engagement is about being questioning voices. And that is what conflict revolution is. Revolutionizing conflict so we hear it as questioning voices, coming from a place of curiosity, coming from a place of hope, coming from a place of collaborating to create together something different than we currently have, that is built on our shared values. That doesn't happen in the current justice system. And that's why it's revolutionary, because it is saying that we need to revolutionize the system that says we're about helping you find justice. So with that, I want to turn this over to Dr. Shedd and introduce our other panelists.
Thanks, DG, and welcome everybody. This is exciting to be a part of. We have at this point finished or gone through a full year with the Contemporary Dispute Resolution Certificate, and so you're going to get a chance to hear from a couple of the faculty who are teaching currently or have taught and will be teaching in the certificate as we move forward, as well as two of the students that were part of that first cohort year that got to go through the program. So both are still finishing up some of the coursework and on that direction, but I think it'll be a great opportunity to hear both from folks that are leading and holding the space and those that are engaging and really building and enhancing and sharpening the skill sets that they came in with to the program. So I'm going to introduce them in terms of their relationship to the program. And then I think our first question for our panelists is going to ask them to talk about specifically how the principles that were compare with their work. So they'll get a chance to tell you a little bit about what their professional backgrounds are as well. So the two faculty members that we have in the On our panel today are Cherise Hariston, who is teaching the conflict coaching class and is bringing her deep experience both in mediation and coaching to the program. And then we have Dr. Mindy Burrell, who is teaching the capstone course and working with students on finishing out their capstone projects and actually getting to do their real life application of what they've been doing through the program. The two students that we have on our panel, I'll introduce is June Huang and Thomas Carter. As I mentioned, both are professionals who are taking their new perspectives as well as the sharpening of their skills and moving them into their professional life, as well as having gotten through now, I think, 3 semesters of coursework with the program and are bringing that forward. So very excited to have them here and get to hear from these sets of voices. So DG, I'm going to turn it to you to ask our group their first question.
All right, thank you. And that first question is, I'll open up to any of the 4 of you who wish to go, is what are some of the concrete, tangible ways you found yourself implementing principles of conflict resolution in your work? So can you provide some concrete, tangible ways in which you have implemented conflict resolution in your work?
Thomas, why don't you go ahead?
Okay, that's just a habit, just being in class. But I think the first thing that popped in my head was the fact, just having the freedom to question everything that I entrench myself in, meaning my environment, the people I engage with, my perspective, the change of that perspective, things that remain the same, whatever, how I identify myself and see myself in society. I think this program has helped me to question things in a sense. Why do things happen? Why is conflict resolution necessary? You know, why there is a limit support to this field. That's one of my biggest gripe, is the lack of support. And I feel that, I'm gonna end on this note, I feel that this program has helped me to rejuvenate my passion to be more of a thought leader and help in the infrastructure of building this new direction we call conflict resolution.
Thank you, Thomas.
I
June?
could add to that. So my field is music. I teach in the Dewberry School of Music. And I think when I first came to this program, I came out of a sense of desperation because I was pressured to have all these diversity, equity, inclusion agenda items suddenly just on the table. And I thought, okay, I've got to find some solutions somewhere. And what I realized is that the program, the study, it kind of changes your life. Like when you come in, you think, all right, I know what I know, and I just need some window dressing to make this okay, you know? But what it really is the change is so deep that it's almost like it's hard for me to remember what I was before I started thinking about it. And one thing that was really, it becomes like the theoretical underpinning actually becomes the thing. And I realized that it's not, the window dressing is almost everything else, but really what is really important are these deeper layers. And once I recognized that, it opens the way to creativity. It made me have stronger suggestions, solutions for creating new ideas, because I was comfortable with the idea that it doesn't exist yet. If solutions existed already, they would be working and we wouldn't have the problems. But to be able to say that change really starts with deeper reflection than you've ever done before. And it changes the listening. And that is very big for a musician to say, because our whole career is supposed to be listening. We can listen to wavelengths, you know. But then to listen, I realized all of a sudden my teaching, what am I doing about introversion in my class versus extroversion? How am I getting softer voices or quieter voices? What am I doing with silence? Am I just getting uncomfortable or filling it with words, you know? So I think for myself, the biggest difference is reflection, but also responsive behavior versus reactive behavior. That I am able to separate, I'm able to find Cherise Hariston's circle. I'm like, where am I on this circle? Am I hit that trigger yet, or have I not hit the trigger? Have I made assumptions? I'm just constantly questioning myself. And in the class that I have right now on mediation, we were doing something about our conflict styles. And I realize I'm either aggressive or completely avoiding and accommodating. And also that I euphemize words like compromise. And to hear that compromise is actually not a great thing. It's kind of, we talked about the lose-lose of compromise versus collaboration. These are all examples of just very aha, earth-shattering moments that really, I think, it's hard to remember life before studying it. So
you both are amazing. It's been a privilege holding that space. It sounds like she passed the ball to you, Cherise, if you want to jump in. Although I promised I wasn't going to call anybody. So if other people do have questions, please
Well,
raise your hand or unmute.
I'll certainly jump in, even though Mindy had her hand up, eager to go. But certainly, as one of the faculty who's honored to teach the conflict coaching course, coaching through conflict, I certainly love hearing from June and Thomas their experience. And for me, conflict revolution begins with us as the individual. And for me, teaching people what it means to support a person through conflict means that it's one of the most important jobs that we can do in that one-on-one support with people. And how we do that, how we are grounded in our own self-awareness and understanding who we are and what motivates us, and having that acute awareness of how we handle our own conflict, really for me is the starting place for the course that I teach. But also as a practitioner who has been in the conflict resolution field for 26 years now, I see the critical starting place as practitioners and as human beings who really value peace and abundance and curiosity and justice and collaboration and partnership. How we do any of those things starts with us. And so for me, I find it really important to walk the talk of this work as a human being, but also as someone who has devoted so much time learning how to be a conflict practitioner who also is supporting others in the practice and the values and the skills. So that's how I jump in with my perspective on the concrete. I walk the talk of my work. And here's the good news. We don't have to be perfect at being conflict revolution practitioners, conflict intervention practitioners. We just have to be aware of where we're at with it. And so to me, that's the one thing that I really love about this work is every day I get a chance to walk the talk of this such important work.
Thank you, Cherise. Appreciate that. Do others want to add anything?
I'll just jump in quickly because you were asking for concrete instances, and actually tomorrow evening I'm going to be, there's a board that I sit on, not the NAFCM board, that is, it's facing some power dynamics and some communication challenges. And so, following along with what Cherise was saying about wanting to walk the talk, I'm going to have a bit of a workshop with them where I'm talking through some of the elements of good communication and understanding and just helping people to think through how to start talking earlier rather than later in a conflict, and how to understand ourselves and our own, what we're contributing to the situation as well. so it's just, I know that my own life is richer and my relationships are deeper and my sense of purpose is stronger from all of these skills that I've had the chance to learn and to practice with all of you. And that's one of the things that I do is I try and share these tools as widely as I possibly can. Starting tomorrow night. Wish me luck.
All right. Well, good luck with that, Mindy. I'm sure they're blessed to have you. That's absolutely wonderful. I didn't know, Julie, if you wanted to share an example you have of using these concrete skills.
Yeah, well,
I know
certainly.
I promised I was going to call on people.
Yeah,
but
you just did it. You know,
I know.
my experience has been that there is much more need for those of us who are comfortable using these skills than there are people who are wandering around feeling comfortable using them. So, you know, in our local community here, at least, there's been a lot of desire from the local communities to figure out how to deal with some of the big challenges of the legacies and the histories that have come down towards us. So for me, you know, a lot of the work has been, how do we deal with street signs that are named after Confederate leaders? What do we do with the legacy of the symbolism that is all around us in Northern Virginia, where you just trip over it, in ways that are good conversations and that people are learning? So, you know, we've seen so many different models happening around the country where in some places people are going in the middle of the night and just taking down a statue, right, with a crane, and then everybody wakes up the next morning and the statue's gone, but the conversation hasn't happened, and no one's learned anything, and no one's grown, and no one is appreciating anybody's understanding of what's happening any differently. And then there's places in which we turn these into court battles, and again, no one's listening and no one's hearing and no one's growing. And so for me, I think the space for thinking about how do we do conflict resolution is, how do we actually have people come out on the other side of the experience of being in conflict, richer, more nuanced, with a better understanding of the world and their community around them, and maybe having been challenged along the way, and having some of their beliefs and their sense of placement in the world have to be challenged by the fact that may not be how everyone sees it. So it's not a comfortable experience, right? It's not one that everybody walks away from maybe feeling like it was just fantastic and they've got this big warm fuzzy. It might mean that we had to do the hard stuff. And really try to help do some of that learning and thinking. So I think that for me would be kind of one way of thinking about practical applications. And I appreciate Mindy's point about these are things we do together. We do them as teams, we do them as communities, we do them in collaboration with our community members. We're not doing to them, we're working with them, right? And we're all working through these questions together. So I think that's a really important piece. I want to maybe go to our next question with the group, because that was the easy stuff, the fun side, right? Here's the ways we do this, that this is really fantastic. What are some of the challenges when you're trying to really do kind of conflict resolution work that challenges status quos potentially, right? And challenges understandings that we might have of conflict. What have you found to be some of the challenges that you all have experienced?
Okay, I was just being polite, waiting. So yeah, I have a reputation to uphold on this meeting. But to answer your question, something June mentioned in the sense of, I think reflection, and I'm gonna give you a little context on my background too. So reflecting to my previous employment, like I was in the military, so worked in that system, worked in the juvenile justice system, growing up in a community that was somewhat challenging, you know, so reflecting on that, I think that's my foundation to be able to identify challenges moving forward and how to deal with challenges. So I say that in a sense of I see conflict. I don't think conflict is like one level. It's like multiple stages of it. Conflict, you can see conflict in the sense of just a verbal disagreement to the point of conflict where it leads to violence or war, you know? So there's a different range of it. And I think some of the challenges is knowing when to intervene, and that takes courage when you're speaking of transparency and being vulnerable. That takes courage and knowing what support you have in order to be that individual to take those steps. Now, in those previous systems I mentioned, I was at the beginning stages. I was, humble, peaceful person, but did not have the appropriate tools to make those rational decisions of how to mediate situations, at the same time maintain my sense of well-being, my peace of mind, right? Because I'm sure a lot of you guys can relate of dealing with systems where you're in the middle, where either employer or making unreasonable expectations, and you having to deal with people who are at odds. However, in your mind, you're wondering, like, why am I selected to resolve this issue if I'm not provided with the proper tools to intervene or to support, right? So that could be frustrating, and knowing what is the appropriate decision. So I would say the challenge is in the sense of not knowing what is your support system, which is key to me. And I'm very in tune to who I associate with and what does that mean when you talk about collaborating, partnership. I think it's important to explore on my end to know what is the lens of the other person that I'm asking to invest in this situation, a common ground. So yeah, those are the couple of things that just stand out, just some challenges.
Thanks,
I will jump right in, Thomas, because right after you, Thomas, because I really, for me, as a practitioner of coaching and conflict coaching, and I do a variety of ways that I support people, but I think the challenge is really for us to open up the field so that more people know that there is support. So I would have loved to have been able to work with you one-on-one, because as we all know, being in conflict robs us of our senses sometimes. My colleague, Jarling Ho, used to talk about conflict being under the temporary influence of conflict. And we lose ourselves in the midst of conflict, difficult situations, systems that aren't working, and all the ways that kind of knock us out of the way. And so for me, a challenge and an opportunity, particularly with the work of conflict coaching, that one-on-one conflict intervention support, is helping people feel comfortable and safe and allowing themselves to reach out and know that there's a way that they can be supported through conflict. And what we do in that one-on-one intervention, and certainly we do that as mediators, helping people prepare for a mediation, that one-on-one. But I see one of the most important opportunities with one-on-one conflict resolution support is helping people have this space where they can explore their situation with the hope of helping them return to their values and to their grounding. And that really is that central part of empowerment that when I think about teaching others how to support people through conflict, that's the opportunity that I see, but also the challenge.
Thanks. I think that's a great reflection of the challenge and opportunity, right, that goes along with facing these challenges as teams and together. June or Mindy, any thoughts about what are some of the challenges that folks face trying to work through, kind of from this different perspective, trying to work through conflict?
I can go. I think it's always hard to work with status quo, because status quo is everything else. It's everything before this moment of time. And I think that status quo carries with it so much loved traditions, identities, emotions. It can sometimes feel overwhelming, to be honest. I think each professor that I've had in the Carter School has at one point or another said a tiny thing that made me go on. And I can start from the very beginning, like DG, there was one class, I literally think we were all freaking out in our mild way, you know, and you just kind of said, look, just think about it and then don't think about it. You literally just said, just give yourself like a 30-minute limit and then just forget about it. And almost every day this year, I've heard your voice going, just think about it and don't think about it. That has been actually so wise for me. And then I don't know if it was in which of the classes after, because I took one in the summer as well, but we studied the quote that, I'm just bad with quotes, but the ripple effect that can be felt around the world. And I have really sometimes thought about that. Like, we can all be the pebble that drops and the concentric circles that work out from that. And I guess that fills me with whatever little pebble that I am, it will ripple out and do something somewhere. And I think that helps me not feel like it's me against status quo. Because it's not really me against anything. But it also does give me courage that if I just say one thing, it is a ripple that changes the status quo just a little bit.
I'm going to take a quick pause there. I wonder if we're having a question from someone. I don't see a hand up, but Catherine Cooley, did you have a question you wanted to ask? I just saw you come up on video.
No, I'm just being friendly, and I'm going to. And I will put a post in, because so I don't have a question so much as just some of what's been spoken here. I can't help it, and I'm biased. I'm on the certification track, almost finished, for nonviolent communication, Dr. Marshall Rosenberg's model. And oh my gosh, it just offers so much in terms of holding people in conflict, helping them to get connected to their values, helping them to get self-connected with empathy, and then empathy for other is pretty magical. And I haven't seen it in the materials I've looked through for the Peace Week, but as I'll put in my post, I'd love to see it here next year if that's possible.
Thanks, Catherine. And interesting, actually, one of the books that DG has been using in the 500 class is called The Empathy Factor. And it's kind of that the next step of NVC, taking it kind of into the workplace and
Yes.
thinking about the ways in which the empathy factor. So I don't know if you've read it, but it's Maria Mirashiro.
Yeah.
But definitely is a fantastic book that we use in the 500, which is the intro class for the Contemporary Dispute Resolution Certificate. So the principles are there. We're not using the NVC label in a lot of ways, but it's absolutely showing up and is a big component of the approach that the Contemporary Dispute Resolution Certificate takes. So I'm really glad you mentioned it and brought that thread into the conversation.
Beautiful. Thank you. Yeah.
And I'm seeing a hand up from Wadha Al-Dabus. Wadha, if you would like to ask your question aloud, I'd love to hear from you. Hi there.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Thomas. My question is about, a couple of the panelists have spoken about, the status quo, operating within systems, and, when you're in a position, whether an employer who's trying to make change or an employee within the system, how do we engage with these systems when we see these kind of principles that are working against conflict revolution instead of with it, especially in this kind of political, social, and economic system that's working against a lot of individuals and is set up to disenfranchise a lot of folks. How do we engage in these systems in a meaningful way to enact the kind of change and community engagement that we're talking about today?
I think that's a great question. And I think it actually echoes one I see in the chat from Georgia, which is about speaking of the status quo. I'm curious about working with conflict where people are operating within cultural norms, things like gender norms, comfort with emotional expression, white supremacy culture, et cetera, and the challenges and opportunities around that. And I see your two questions dovetailing about what do we do when we're facing, these kind of overwhelming systems that, as DG said, when you're fish in the water, you don't realize you're in the water, right? So we're in these systems and we don't realize that they're existing all around us. Or not everyone realizes they're existing all around us. Some people are very, very aware that these systems are in front of them. So how do we actually confront those omnipresent systems? And Cherise has come off mute, so my guess is she has a thought.
I have lots of thoughts, and And I think part of the answer is, and I keep going back to our individual selves. Now, I certainly work with people in organizations who are in organizations that have unfair policies. They have terrible supervision and management. And so, and one of my favorite, and it's odd to say it this way, but one of my most favorite conflict coaching clients was through the process of getting clear about their situation and what their options were, and thinking through those and talking through those and trying some things out. They got very clear they needed to leave. And they left from a place of empowerment and not disempowerment and rage and frustration and hopelessness. They left, unlike other people I know in the past organizations where they took all the hard drives and they burned stuff, right? Literally and figuratively. And so part of what I think conflict evolution is in this work and this certificate is, how do I, as a person who is supporting others in these systems that are structured unfairly or structured to marginalize voices, how can I support that individual who comes to me knowing what I do to get really grounded and clear about their values, how they want to show up, so they can make the best choices, whether that choice be to leave, whether that choice be to have a courageous, difficult conversation that puts them at risk, right? And when they have that brave conversation that puts themselves at risk, who do they go to for support to get through? So that's part of, I think, what this certificate, the courses in the program are helping people learn the skills about how to support people through those kinds of issues.
If I may, I just wanted to add, when it comes to all the cultural issues that you list, we work through to sharpen your skill on how do I find the acupuncture point of readiness. It may not be where we want the two groups to be, or the individuals that are in conflict. It may not be what we see, like, why aren't you seeing this? That doesn't matter. It matters helping them to see what they're ready to see at that moment, and finding that point of readiness, what we call the acupuncture point of, let's begin there. Let's start there. That's part of the gift of conflict revolution. It's not about the conflict is resolved, now it's never come up again. Conflict revolution means that issue may continually come up as we continue to evolve and change and grow. What we learn is how to sit with it, how to bathe with it, and how to then decide to walk through it. So on all those big issues you listed, we hope everyone addresses all of them to their place of readiness at that moment, and recognizing and respecting the community and individuals are not avoiding conflict. They're not running away from it. They're not fighting it. They're not resisting it. They're not freezing, immobilized by it, but they're allowing it to free themselves to be in their place of readiness and truth at that moment. And what we have found is that when you're able to help individuals be in that place, how the ability to then figure out how to co-create becomes rather easy in the moment for the acupuncture point that they're dealing with.
I'd like to add something to this conversation, if you don't mind. I also want to give props to DG and Dr. Shedd, because something I've learned in their class was, we have to understand that organizations is a living organism, meaning that it's filled with people. We tend to forget that, regardless of how big and how impactful let's say Amazon and things of that nature, we're still talking about people. And just like any system, it needs to work together in order for the system as a whole to function. However, when something's out of place, just like an organism, that's where problems develop, sickness and things of that as examples. So we have to look at it from that perspective. And something else I learned in this program, which has helped me to be more proactive in my thinking, is strength-based. So I think for me is always trying to be tactful and strategic in how I deal with conflict, because something I recognize when people's livelihood is attached to the status quo, you're going to get a lot of resistance because of that. That's understandable in a sense of you're going to come to a crossroads where you're going to have to make a tough decision. If I'm going to make this decision based on status quo to maintain my lifestyle at the extent of my integrity or empathy for something, or those issues are always, we're always going to be dealing with those type of decisions. So I would say in that sense, I try to look for positive measures, like look for what already exists, what works, and work on how can I expand that. The reason why I'm suggesting that, because on the flip end, you're actually problem solving the conflict. So what works counters what doesn't work, right? So if we're talking about criminalization, well, what works into minimizing that? Education, conflict resolution, support, me investing my time and talents and skills to somebody that may not have that, that might propel to give them a different way of thinking. Because and that's something I learned as a probation officer. It wasn't about me maintaining my safety. It was about looking through the lens of the young people that I was dealing with and trying to understand, well, what are their needs? How can I maximize their safety? Because if they feel safe, that reinforces my safety. I don't know why my colleagues didn't get that, but it was easy for me to figure out once these principles came about. And that's just like anything. If you invest in your community, invest in your family, invest in others, regardless of what the status quo say, you're more likely to get that reinvestment back in, because people are going to recognize that connection and that commitment you provided to them. And so hopefully that was helpful.
I think that's I'm glad you emphasized that point, Thomas. I think what's really important about that is that these are not tools that we are just applying because we know how to do coaching, right? Or we know how to do mediation. They are about identifying systems and the people in them. And as DG said, where they're at and what they need and where they can connect. And so, you know, it may not be a good time for a coaching conversation, right, in this particular situation, or they may not be prepared to do a community facilitation. I've certainly had that experience where we've ended up with community groups who were not actually ready to have the conversation that we were trying to make them have, right? Because a policy decision needed to be made, but the groundwork hadn't been laid yet. And so I think that that's a really important piece. And you know, we spend a lot of time in it in the intro class, and I know that it does in the other classes as well, of trying to really get into and really getting to the meaning of what's happening so that we can best match up what kind of supports we can bring with what's needed at the moment. And I think that's what makes us really different from when we go get training, right, in how do I do mediation, or when I go get a training course in how to do a facilitation, right, which are often focused on the tool and the skill to run it, but not necessarily being super smart about how do I think about what's happening in the situation and how to apply the right tool. And I appreciate that about what we're doing, is that, you know, in one situation, what Cherise is working with in terms of coaching is going to be the right solution. But in another situation, what Jeannie was doing in the mediation class will be it, or what Terry was doing in the facilitation class. And that we as people who want to revolutionize conflict have to think about what is the full range of opportunities. And that's where I think we're doing it differently than some of the small slices of things that I think a lot of folks who end up having to do this work get, right? They get the 10-hour training in a tool or another. And I think that the opportunity to have a variety of tools at our disposal is a super important piece of doing that personalization that Thomas was talking about. DG, I think that actually moves us kind of easily into that next question that you were going to pose. And so maybe I will transition it over to you.
Absolutely. And so what does it mean for how we should be teaching dispute resolution? It's hard for me to say. I'm just saying conflict resolution, dispute resolution in our academy. What does it say? How does this inform how we should be teaching this?
I think Julie really sort of answered that question for us preemptively. And maybe it's because I'm working on the practicum, but I think keeping it practical and giving people Very few people do that. But on the other hand, skills are always things that we can learn. And so I think that definitely a way to teach it is to keep it practical and keep learning and honing and building those skills and the courage that comes along with it. That's
I don't know if I was the only one that had you fading a little bit in and out, Mindy, but was hearing about the courage and being practical. Okay, so we got the main thoughts, and again, I'm not sure if I was the only one that had you a little fading in and out. But how about others? I think that's what I have found in how we teach it is that we don't want to be teaching anyone anything new as a skill. We want to be sharpening your skills as all four, Thomas, June, Cherise, and Julie have also shared, that how do I use it to the best for the people in the conflict? And how do I know when best to pull out what skill, and how do I know when to put it away? So that it is not, I'm coming in with my one item and it's going to work for you. Because what we're trying to do in conflict resolution is having those in conflict be able to be real with each other, right? Transparent, able to create their own choices, able to communicate in a way that shows respect and recognition for each other. So it's not about what works for us. It's about what works for those in conflict. And so each one's going to be slightly different as you go to it. And so what we hope in the certification process is having you and encourage you to become comfortable with that challenge that Mindy was laying out. And the courage, she used the word courage. It is a lot easier in my mind to do the alternative dispute resolution as the justice system, because it's here's the rules, here's how you do it, here's who's in charge, here's how it goes. Conflict resolution is really letting go of anyone holding the space believing they're in charge of anything, and allowing those in conflict to really own that they're in charge. So how do you help them create the type of world, the type of relationship they're wanting? And again, we do a lot of that with Shiro's work on looking at what is the need and then what do you want? And the need is never what you as the practitioner wants to do or want to accomplish. The need is for you as a practitioner, really hearing what that need is in the group, really hearing what the want is that is desired, and then figuring out which tool or tools are best to help raise that need to the forefront so everyone can be vulnerable talking about it, and then allowing everyone, inviting everyone to create that want together. What we have found, I have found when using this type of frame, is that it's much more sustainable for communities, because conflict is always going to happen. But so many times what we resolve is the coat that covers up the conflict and say, okay, it got resolved. They have a custody agreement. They have a deceased order. They have whatever. And we need to get under that coat and help them take off the coat and really, really begin to take those first steps, as June so well laid out, being that pebble in the water. Take that first step. And because conflict is natural and always going to happen, be ready to take the second step and the third step. Because if we're really going to meet our need, the need is to take those steps to get where we want. So I think that really is the magic that we have found with this opportunity that the Carter School has put together with Julie and Thomas's leadership, is to allow us an opportunity to invite you in, to help you sharpen your skills you already have, and then be able to be that pebble, creating a magnitude of difference that allows the people in the conflict to decide, that's not the tool I want, here's the tool I want, here's one that's going to work best for us. And then hold that space for them as they co-create. And I would like to invite, as we only have a few minutes left, for people to any additional questions folks may have. And then certainly would like to do a round robin of all our panelists. We'll end with Thomas being our last panelist on your reflections of the day. But before we do that, if there are other questions, other thoughts, if you would like to answer any of the questions that Julie and I posed, please feel free to jump in and do that. This is your opportunity to keep unpacking what does it mean, conflict revolution.
No, DG, oh, sorry, someone was starting to talk. Sorry about that.
That was me, so go ahead. Yep, go ahead, Thomas.
Well,
and we also have a question. Go ahead.
Oh, I'll tell you what, I will cede to Wadha, because I do have a question actually, but let me cede to Wadha because I'd love to hear what some of our participants think. Wadha, why don't you go ahead?
So the question for the panel is conflict resolution possible if there is no accountability? Is conflict resolution possible when there's no accountability? I know my reflection, but I want to hear from you all.
I think it would depend on the situation and whether accountability is needed. So, we talk a lot in the field about the tensions between peace and justice when we're looking at post-conflict spaces, and I think I would unpack it in the situation it's in to figure out what accountability would need to look like, and if accountability is something that the parties actually need in order to move forward. So I think I'd love to be in conversation with you, because it sounds like there might be something in particular that you're thinking about, and would be happy to separately have a conversation about how we might get into that. But I think I'd start out by trying to figure out what accountability would mean to them, and if it feels like something the parties need in order to be able to have whatever their appropriate next steps are.
Absolutely. That's what you are. You are who you are, Julie. Absolutely. Spot on. Sit down with them and define what accountability is for them and see if it's needed. Are there other responses to that before? I think Thomas said he had a question. Go ahead, Julie.
Oh, I was going to say we also have a hand up. So I think if there's other responses, we have a question.
Oh, Wada, you have a hand up. My apologies. I saw the question.
Thomas
had a question. Wada, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you so much. Sorry for taking more of your time, but I just wanted to take this opportunity. In terms of within the conflict school itself, I think one question that I had at the beginning of my journey in conflict is that there isn't as much diversity in school of thought and challenging within the system itself, because I feel like it's such a relatively new field, and especially coming from a liberal arts teaching, there is a sense of neoliberal, imperial, like cultural imperialism in the way that we approach conflict, because there are so many different, schools of thought and approaches, and we're learning a lot about them, but we don't see it as much embedded in the theories and the foundation of conflict. It's more of a wave that, a lot of the researchers presently are kind of changing, or it starts more towards the 90s and 80s. And I would love to hear from you all, how to maximize that environment within the university and within our learning.
The only thing I would add to this, actually, as someone who works in academic administration alongside Julie and has been a professor since 2009, is that I think Wadha's question takes on even more importance when you consider the fact that universities themselves are a place of hierarchy, right? In which the general assumptions of faculty is that, I'm transferring knowledge to you, right? And I think one of the things we hear, and a lot of the things that June and Thomas had to say, that Mindy, Cherise, DG, and Julie have had to say, right, is subverting that assumption. Because otherwise universities, to take Wadha's question, can become places where we don't do that work very well if we rely too heavily on hierarchies that professors have all the knowledge. So I think Wadha's question is really, but I don't have any answers, but I think Wadha's question is very important.
The one thing I think that is really intriguing about this field is it is really highly interdisciplinary. I mean, I came in thinking at any one point, if I cannot relate what I am doing to my field of music, I'm going to stop. But it's always relatable because it's really just about human connections, and that is everywhere. And I think that I remember in one of the classes, we were talking about how do you get something done even if the hierarchy seems to be against you? Like, how can you still get work done, that the work really happens on the worker bee level? It's not always the people with the power seemingly at the top. And I've really taken that to heart. And I think that if you're interested in this work, you will actually find a way to connect it to the rest of your life, and you will be the person that creates the new path forward.
Thank you, June. Thomas, you were trying to unmute. Did you want to add a comment? We'll
Yeah, I just want to start off by saying that this program has helped me to understand that learning is about finding your purpose, you know, and I think, and it's fine, this is a certificate program, so it's not like a master's or PhD, but it's just or even more impactful from what I've experienced in the other ones. Why? Because I recognize I have more clarity on how I want to utilize these skills and how to market myself and what does it mean to be a change agent. So along those lines, I would say being a conflict revolutionist is about see yourself as an investigator. You're an explorer. You're trying these skills with no fear to it. So we were talking about regarding I guess somebody was mentioning about the school and such. Something I've done while in class, which is all theory, I've been volunteering time in the community through NVMS, which is attached to the Carter School, to apply my skills and support and just explore what does it mean to be in this field or in this community. And I found a tribe, and I'm working on a project right now where there's a faith base where we're working on a program for community and police engagement. So I'm working with that person on that, but I'm already thinking ahead. I'm even talking to how can we maximize the situation? And I'm thinking, what logistics can we utilize to add more support? What you're doing also to all the other stakeholders. So I'm reaching out, listing out names of potential people that they can invite based on the subject matter, based on who they are, and look at it. Hey, this could be a networking or an event, not just talking about the subject, but people can engage, swap information, and so on and so on. So I think it's being innovative. So it's about being innovative, being creative. You know, how do you envision yourself in the world you want to live in, and not being afraid of trying different things and using what resources you have? You're a student. I think as students, we underutilize that power. What does that mean? I guess I was bold enough where I invited people with similar practices like faculty members and such, just to reach out. Hey, I'm a student. I'd like to invite you to see if your students might be interested in blah, blah, blah. That doesn't necessarily mean somebody's going to respond as such, but the fact I took that initiative, maybe I'll do a follow-up and say, hey, do you have some time? I'd love to talk to you about your course or something. The worst thing they could say is no, or where they're going to report to the president. Why is this student bothering? Maybe, I don't know. But you got to be mindful of how you talk to people, their role in things. So you got to be tactful, but make sure you have clarity of what is your intent when you're connecting with people. You know, I'm not going to reach out to the president. I might start with my professor. Maybe they can refer me to the dean. And then based on that conversation, the dean and myself may approach the president based on everybody having an understanding what's my intent of reaching the president, right? So you gotta be mindful of that. You know, so that's just something I wanted to bring up.
I know that we could go for another hour and a half, and I want to make sure we get our round robin in before we need to close out, because folks have a 6 o'clock that we want to make sure we get you to. I June and Thomas, I miss you. You guys are great. I learned every day we were together, and are still learning. Was here taking notes. So this is absolutely amazing. And so I apologize to the last person who asked the question. We delved deeply into the 500. So sign up for it and ask the question again, and we'll definitely do it. Or shoot any of us an email, and we can certainly talk offline. Thomas, I didn't know if you still want to do your question before we do our final. Okay. The final round robin I'd like to ask a panelist, which is always how we like to end a lot of our sessions, is what would you say is the gift you've received in your journey of becoming a conflict revolutionary? What is something that you received either unexpectedly, didn't know this was going to tap into this is amazing, or received and is thrilled because you were hoping it would happen? So just want to do a round robin with each of you, and we'll end with Thomas so he can also then close us out. During this process of developing the course, taking the course, holding space for students in the course, what is something you received in your round robin process of learning about conflict revolution? And so I'm going to start with you, Julie, and then Cherise, you're next. I'm just letting you know. Julie,
so
what's something you received?
Yeah. I always am appreciative as someone who often doesn't spend a whole lot of time, or doesn't have a whole lot of time to reflect on what's happening in the moment, because I'm too busy trying to make the next thing happen that needs to happen. I think for me, what has really been something to receive in the program is to have questions that are forcing me to think, and some of the questions you all are asking in the chat really forcing to think about how would I respond to that? What does that mean? So we're all learning together. Some of us just have had some experiences that we're able to share that help all of us think through and reflect. And so for me, having an opportunity to really have some of my thinking get pushed has been really valuable.
Thank you, Julie. Cherise, and after Cherise, Thomas Carter, you'll go next. Cherise.
Well, I would say the gift. I really just the experience designing and teaching the course for the first time last spring. The gift of doing that and being with the students was a reminder, I think, of how important holding space for people is. And in doing that, what's involved is what I like to call full body presence and openness and a willingness to journey together. And so that gift was just truly transformative for me. I mean, literally, I was thinking if I died, which is a terrible thing to say, right? Knock on wood. But after teaching that course, there was just such a deep sense of gratitude and fulfillment that I was able to hopefully hold space and be present and be a partner with the students through that course. So it became more of just a course. I mean, it was really just a way to kind of model and show and learn together. So there's multiple gifts in there, but just a deep sense of fulfillment and gratitude for my experience.
Thank you, Cherise. Thomas, and Thomas, Mindy, you'll be going. Thomas, what is a gift you got to unpack going through this process?
How much I value community building, how much people and their perspective on things. I don't want to be right. That's something I realized a long time ago, that it's not about me being right all the time, which lessened a lot of stress out of my life. I just want to be present and listen and learn and just engage and just create moments for myself, right?
Yes.
I think I'm all about the pleasantries of life. You know, that's how me and my wife talk. We think about what are enjoyable things to live out your life, you know, and not worry about the negative aspects, you know, because if you can't control it, why invest time into it? So I invest energy in my time of what keeps me at peace, what keeps my community flourishing. That can be through economic, public safety, if you want to get real descriptive, but ultimately just learning how I can invest in a peaceful surrounding for myself and for others.
Thank you, Thomas. Mindy, you're next, and Junior will follow Mindy. Mindy, what's a gift you've got to unpack being in this experience?
As others have said, the community and the chance for reflection and for growth in partnership with other people is just a treasure.
Thank you, Mindy. June, and then we'll end with you, Thomas. June, what's a gift you got to unpack going through this process?
I think it also has to do with community. I think I've spent a lot of my life either for various reasons kind of thinking I'm part of a community, but not really a member of the community, feeling a little bit solo and siloed. And some of that has been to my own, I have some control over that. I realize that sometimes that happens just as a reaction. And it's very interesting with the classes in the Carter School, because community doesn't have to be years in the making. It can actually be instant. And that's a revelation for me, and that communities can be built anywhere at any time. So, and then just being at peace with that it's okay to not know answers, that to come away with more questions than answers is an okay state to be in.
Absolutely. Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for willing to be on this panel and be in this process. I feel blessed being in the same space with all of you. And so, Thomas, please close us out. And what was your gift, Thomas? Please answer the question for your close us out.
Well, I think my gift has been to learn a lot about something I didn't know a lot about. I don't come from the field of dispute resolution. That's not been where my work has been. My work's been as a political scientist who understands democracy and conflict. And so sitting in on these conversations, I just feel like a sponge who actually wants to take the program that he directs, which I'm pretty sure would create some sort of conflict of interest. I feel like I learned so much in these conversations where I just get to sit in and listen to all of you, like I've been doing today. The question I would have asked, and one of the thoughts I kept having throughout, I'm someone who's thought a lot about democracy, about democratic backsliding, when do democratic norms erode. And there's one thing sort of that we know relatively well, right, is that there are such things as democratic norms that are just held by elites. And we worry about backsliding in elite democratic norms. We care about everyday people's democratic norms. What do they think about how systems work, and do they carry those values in their daily lives, and how do they act on those? And I just could not help thinking over and over and over again that when I hear what y'all are talking about, what I hear in part is creating good citizens. Right, creating ways of doing conflict resolution in local settings that might be school boards or renaming commissions to rename roads, Julie. Right, that might be local debates about banning books in the libraries. Right, and these discussions that we have are about, in part, having the values that make us open to have productive conversations about community issues, right? And if that could be in my co-op building here, right, or it could be in a state legislature, and a lot of the skills that you talk about are about people becoming practitioners. I think it's also about people becoming citizens, right? And I could not think about that. I could not help but think about that link to democratic values. But anyway, that's enough from me. I'm here to be tech support, but I just really want to thank all of our panelists for this tremendous discussions, and to our audience for so many perceptive questions. Our main goal today has been to think about this concept of conflict resolution that people can use in their daily lives as mediators. But as the director of graduate programs, I would be remiss to not take a quick minute to say, we had this fantastic certificate in contemporary dispute resolution, and all the people you see on the screen now are involved in it. DG and Julie directing it, Thomas and June being students in it, Cherise and Mindy teaching in it, DG and Julie also, sorry, teaching in it. And we have all sorts of exciting new funding opportunities for applicants who can get their certificate completely paid for if you're approved for funding through the Dominion Energy scholarships that we have. You can see a link that I put in the chat, and I can resend that link now. If you want to hear anything more about the program, we have a great website that kind of lays out how you apply and how the program works. So I really do hope that you'll take the chance. You'll take the chance to do that. I also point out that we have an event starting at 6 o'clock on careers in peace. that I hope people can go. I put the link to that in the chat as well. Finally, again, thanks to our panelists and to all of you for attending. We hope you can attend a lot more Peace Week events. They're stretching tomorrow, Thursday, and Friday in person and online. So I hope many of you can go to those. So again, thank you everyone for this wonderful event. And I will hopefully see people at future panels throughout the week. Take care, everyone.